The Urania/Spiderkin are developing a lot differently than the Ratkin/Ratkin. I don't know why that surprises me. Basically, the only thing they have in common is that they come from my spawners. I guess the biggest difference is their dimorphism and trimorphism. Have I mentioned I'm not a biologist? The Ratkin ladies gain boobs as the bar filled. Not enough to go bouncing around me, but enough to feed their children like the mammals they are. The Spiderkin are, well, I'm pretty sure if I was a biologist, I'd be yelling about how that's not how any of this works. Where do I even start with how they're changing? Well, I'll start with the male Spiderkin, since they're not changing much at all. Well, okay, that's not fair, but compared to the women, their changes are pretty minor. Their faces are changing, gaining a bunch of smaller chitin plates that can move a lot more, making them way more expressive. It makes me think of maybe a detailed helmet or mask with some animatronics. They're getting over the hump from being ugly to being cool. I wouldn't be surprised if some version of Power Rangers had helmets like their faces. Their mouth is also kinda sideways. It's weird to explain. I think that might be more like their lips than their actual mouth parts though. There's a jagged vertical line around a rough square for their mouth. I've seen them yawn, though, and past the lips is a nightmare of mandibles and pedipalps, and whatever the words are. Still not a biologist. The males aren't growing larger, though. I'm pretty sure most male spiders are smaller than the females back home, so I guess it makes sense. I just thought they'd grow to similar size when they're smart. The other big difference between the spider sexes is that the males are still staying pretty low slung. While the two pairs of legs at the front are gaining definite hands for both sexes, the male hands are still being used to help walk. They kinda knuckle walk on the ground and then use the hands to actually grip when climbing stuff. The women only sometimes use their hands to help climb, and they've been moving more towards a spider centaur body shape. So I'm pretty sure they're growing a lot of extra bits. Pretty sure spiders only really have two sections. The butt that has their organs or equivalents, and the section that has all the legs attached. I think the head is just kinda tacked on to that part. I could just go look, but that's not really my point. My point is they've gained a torso bit that stands more or less straight up, and that two sets of arms have migrated there. They also have actual heads. They seem to still have 8 eyes, but only the 2 in the normal eye spots are big. They even have an irising lid, like a camera. It's really cool. The other eyes are smaller and ring the head, and are easy to forget about if you're not looking. They also appear to have grown something on their chests. It could be boobs with a chitin plate covering them, or spinnerets, or venom sacs, or even just muscle. I honestly haven't been brave enough to try to take a closer look. The nightmare of seeing inside the mouth of one still haunts me. The part that I really think would make a biologist have a fit, though, is I think they're growing an internal skeleton. Or maybe just in certain places, or certain species. This is what I meant about the trimorphism earlier. While the males are smaller and a lot different from the females, I'm also seeing 3 races, I guess would be the proper term. There's relatively small ones that seem built like jumping spiders. They are a lot of different colours and patterns, though the classic wolf spider greys and stripes seem to be the majority. They're busy little spiderkin, and seem the most inclined towards going out to hunt. There's always at least one party of them out in the tunnels and caverns past my borders looking for food. I'm not exactly surprised by that, at least. I've never heard of a spider growing mushrooms to eat or anything like that, so my spiderkin being carnivores is no big shock. I do wonder if they'll be able to eat other stuff too, or if they'll be staying with meat. The normal-sized ones are definitely more based on black widows. They have shiny black carapaces, rounded back sides, slender limbs, and have the red hourglass marking. I expect they have potent venom too, but they haven't really bitten anything. Instead, they seem more content to stay inside the area for their enclave and build. Widow web is supposed to be stupidly strong, so I suppose it makes sense. Interestingly, the males help out a lot with the building too. They seem to be the ones to use the picks they brought with them, and with stone and webbing, the enclave is coming along nicely. I think they're even building a little animal pen, so maybe they'll be able to ranch later. Oh, I should have Aranya try to introduce them to fishing. There's got to be something aquatic around here worth eating, and should be a lot easier to domesticate than something like a cyborg, or whatever else wanders around on land down here. The larger ones seem to be based on tarantulas. They're built stockier and their carapace looks like it's growing around muscle. It makes me think of Roman ab armor, as seen in movies, but the presence of abs is why I think some of them are growing internal skeletons. Normal spiders don't really have muscle. Instead they have hydraulics, basically. Muscles need internal bones to be able to leverage for movement. I wonder if they're doing a hybrid kind of system. Muscles for fast movements, hydraulics for strength. However, they actually work. The tarantulas are taking the place of guards, with a couple helping move around heavy stuff. Interestingly, Tiny has taken a couple of trips down to the Enclave too, along with Aranya and Timo. The big guy has apparently been dispensing the Wisdom of the Weaver, which even has Aranya listening. Great. Just when I thought the whole cult business might quiet down. He's also apparently being something of an oracle, saying he could read the pattern of the weave. I would usually ignore that kind of talk, but I do have fate affinity. I probably should have expected at least one sign would lean into that aspect, instead of whatever else they have. I should actually try to grill the big lug about how that works, come to think of it. I poked Timo about the fishing potential, and he squeaks at Aranya from her shoulder.
Hey, Aranya, the boss suggests trying to teach them how to fish, maybe with weighted nets? He says a rod and reel might be a bit much for them to try right now.
The kobold brightens at that.
Ah, fishing. That should be a lot simpler than trying to teach them how to domesticate whatever is walking or flying in the deeper tunnels.
Thank you, Thedium, she says with a slightly bowed head. And Timo takes the chance to hop off and nod to Tiny.
I'm gonna stay here with the big guy. The boss wants to talk with him.
Aranya simply nods at that, and heads off to gather as many Spiderkin as she can to teach how to fish. Tiny shuffles his legs slightly when he hears Timo say, "I want to talk." So, reading the weave? I can't hear anything from Tiny, as he explains what he can for my question to Timo, which makes me wonder how my favourite rat actually hears everything. I can't chew on that puzzle for very long though, as Timo starts talking.
He says he can see the tapestry you're weaving, and if he concentrates he can see the greater tapestry around us being woven as well, says Timo, clearly weirded out by the description. That's pretty cool though. Can he tell if the winter will be a harsh one? Timo asks, and is answered, and shakes his head. He says he can't read that far ahead, or that far away. He says there's a lot of distance between the cause of a harsh winter and the effect of feeling one.
I probably shouldn't expect him to be a more accurate weatherman than people with radar and satellite images and stuff. Maybe if he could get a read on more of how the weather is on the entire planet, he'd be able to make a guess. I go to ask Timo another question, and see him rubbing his head. Oh, sorry about that.
It's okay, boss. You weren't too focused on those things, so it was more disorienting than painful. I've been getting better at ignoring deeper implications for things, but how am I supposed to ignore the idea of an eye so high up it can hide in the stars? He shakes his head and chuckles. We're both getting better at it, though. What else did you want to ask him?
I was going to ask him how he reads the stuff, what it's like. He must be using fate magic to do it, but I know almost nothing about it, and only have the vaguest ideas of what it even could be. Timo relays the information, and soon replies.
He says it's like he can see a web as it's formed right now. Also see the ways it might be finished all at once?
Ah, brace yourself then, Timo. That sounds like quantum superposition. Ask him if looking changes things. Even with the warning, it looks like Timo loses his balance for a moment, but thankfully only a moment. He looks a bit confused at my question, but relays it anyway.
He says no?
Maybe not quantum then. Or magic can measure without changing the results, because magic, Either way, that's very interesting. Does he spot any potential snarls in my web? Timo shakes his head.
Tiny says he doesn't see anything, and he likely wouldn't say anything even if he does, barring something catastrophic. He says you integrate problems much too smooth for him to try to keep them out.
I chuckle at that. Well, tell him thanks, I suppose. I'm a regular Bob Ross over here, making happy little accidents. Still, that does make me want to keep prepared for something potentially dangerous. He seems to need to be able to observe the various causes to see how the web will change, so some big surprise could make a mess of things and blindside him, and so us. Tell him thanks to me, and to keep up the good work. The hedge maze is the wild success it is because of him, and he's the only one who seems to be delving into the fate magic, so I'm sure I'll need to pick his brain about it eventually too. I get the feeling I won't be able to ignore that magic forever.